And continuing from the last movie, I can join act and supporting act table. Remember, we're not working on the show table, and let's blow this up so we can see it. And here we're joining sa.supporting act with act. We have to use the alias because we don't know where these fields are coming from at this point. And there it's joined it. The above is exactly the same as joining in the where clause. Now, given that the columns are now different between act and supporting act, I obviously can't do this. Act join with supporting act using act ID. Run this. That should give me an error. And obviously I can't do this either, because the column is not common to both tables. I can, however, do this. Now, well, I can do something like this. This is interesting because Oracle has pulled the act ID and supporting act ID from the tables without worrying about the alias, because the act table doesn't have a supporting act ID column and the supporting act table doesn't have an act ID column. Obviously I can use the aliases if I want to, and we'll get the same result. A.act SA. This should give me a positive result. However, I went and tried to pull the supporting act ID from the act table, which doesn't exist, and the act ID from the supporting act table, we should get an error because it doesn't know what the columns are. It says a.supporting act ID is invalid, obviously. So let's just make this a valid query again. In fact, what we should do to store it in the work file is we should do this. Select star from act join supporting act on. We'd have a.act ID equals sa.supporting act ID. So now we can actually rename the column back, and we can join some more tables. So let's join the category to the show to the venue, and we get all sorts of intersecting data. We can do select from category, join to show using category ID, join to act, join to venue, and let's select all that information as well. This one here is interesting because what we've got is lots of tables joining across the entire table structure. This query didn't work, but it didn't give me much information. I take this query and I copy it into SQL Plus. Guess what it does? It gives me a better answer. It says line 5, column ambiguously defined, pointing out the state code. So I went in here and I fixed the state code and changed it to on. I copy and paste this again. I go into SQL Plus, and what else does it tell me? It tells me line 6, the country ID is ambiguous. So I go down here again and I'll set the country ID up. I'll copy this again and go to here, right click, and eventually you get it to work. So just be aware of that. SQL Developer doesn't always give you enough information. SQL Plus can sometimes be clearer in terms of the errors you get, and then when you do get those errors, read them carefully because it may very well tell you exactly where your mistake is.